welcome to all attendees, with special welcome to the Ambassador of the Kingdom of the Netherlands to Indonesia, Mr. Mark Gerritsen, Director of Islamic Higher Education of the Ministry of Religious Affairs, Prof. Sahiron, Rektor of UIN Jakarta, Prof. Asep Saifuddin, Rektor of UIN Banten, Prof. Muhammad Isom, Vice Rector of Universitas Islam Internasional Indonesia, my boss, Associate Professor Syafiq Hasim, Vice Rector of UIN Jakarta, Dr. Din Wahid, Dr. Nur Kafid, Head of the Sub-Directorate of Research and Community Service at the Directorate General of Islamic Education of the Ministry of Religion. My name is Berawan Noraga and I will be the moderator for this event. The theme of this year's Cleveringga lecture is Reclaiming the Future in the Age of AI, Islam, Disruptive Technologies, and the Need for Future Literacy. When we talk about Islam and disruptive technologies, our Orientalist mindset might think that these two concepts are not really connected well. When we are talking about disruptive technologies, we are talking about development, we are talking about progress. For instance, last year we had iPhone 16, this year we have iPhone 17, and next year we will have iPhone with more features and also more interesting stuff. But when we are talking about Islam, often we are talking about past-oriented code, since Muslims try to preserve their long-standing traditions. But Islam also has their own future-oriented code that might be different from the future imagined by big tech companies, because Islam's imagination of future encompasses not only worldly affairs but also ethical, moral, and spiritual affairs. And that's why I believe it will be really interesting to discuss these topics in this meeting, especially in the context of Indonesia, where Muslims who are known for their piety, their attempts to implement Islam in everyday life, and at the same time they are also really active with their engagement with technology, with social media, and so on. So in this meeting, we are going to discuss how Muslims in Indonesia in particular imagine and shape their future in the context of Islam and also in the context of growing technological development. Okay, before we move on to the main discussion, we are going to hear some words from Mr. Mark Belen. He's the director of KITLV Jakarta and the director of the Office of Leiden University of Indonesia. And he will give welcoming remarks and a short explanation of what the Cleveringga lecture is about. For Pak Marik, the floor is yours.
So, dear distinguished guests, alumni, friends and colleagues, welcome to this year's edition of the Cleveringga lecture. The Cleveringga lecture is organized or given every year in the month of November to commemorate Professor Rudolf Cleveringga, who on the 26th of November in 1940 read aloud his famous protest speech in front of the Academy building in Leiden. As Dean of the Law Faculty, he denounced the measures taken by the invading Germans of removing university professors from their posts because of their religious background. Cleveringga was arrested by the German security and remained in prison until the summer of 1941. Having listened to and inspired by Cleveringga's speech, Leiden students decided to go on strike. And the university was then subsequently closed by the occupying forces until the end of war. The importance to Cleveringga's action and its significance is to this day given by Leiden University. The university's own motto is Praesidium Libertatis, which means in English, bastion of freedom. It serves as an expression that academic freedom is the universal right for academics all over the world, regardless of background, religion, ethnicity, and that a university should be a safe place for discussions and discourse. The Cleveringga lectures are co-organized with the Leiden University Fund, or in short LUF, and the fund is supported by alumni for the advancement of Leiden University. The main activity of the Leiden University Fund is raising funds to reward research grants to students and young scientists. Cleveringa Lectures are annually held not only in the Netherlands, but also around the world. This year lectures are organized in 16 cities in the Netherlands and 18 cities abroad, amongst others in Beijing, Calgary, Dubai, London, Paris, and of course today in Jakarta. I'm very pleased that this year's edition bears a topic that is quite stirring up public discussions: the growing influence of artificial intelligence and related emerging new technologies in our daily lives. Will it be a blessing for humanity or a threat, or maybe both? This evening we have 3 distinguished speakers who will, from different perspectives, but from the viewpoint of Islam, will shed their light on whether we are able or need to reclaim our future in the age of AI. As I'm not allowed to speak long because somebody will put on the board that I only have 1 minute left, I would like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude to all guests for joining us today for the Cleveringa Lecture. First of all, I would like to thank the Ministry of Religious Affairs and all representatives present for their support and being the co-organizer of this event. Also thanks to the Dutch Embassy team and also the staff of Erasmushuis for supporting this event and making this beautiful venue available. I'm very honored and grateful that Pak Sahiron, as the representative of the Minister of Religious Affairs, and Ambassador Mark Harrison have made themselves available to give some welcoming remarks. My appreciation also goes to Ms. Birawa Anuraga from UITIKA for being our moderator and also MC, I'm sorry. And last but certainly not least, thanks to all my colleagues of the Office of Leiden University in Indonesia and KTV Jakarta for the time and effort invested in preparing and organizing this gathering. So I hope you will enjoy the presentations and discussions of this year's Cleveringa Lecture. Thank you very much for your attention. Terima kasih.
Okay, now we are going to listen to welcoming remarks by Excellency Ambassador of the Kingdom of the Netherlands to Indonesia, Mark Harrison, and we are really honored to have him here amidst his busy schedule. Your time is yours.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really glad that the Embassy and Erasmushuis can offer this venue for this very important gathering, annual gathering. And I think it's also fitting because Erasmus and his thinking, even though he was from Rotterdam, is very much in line with the way Cleveringa also was thinking. It's my pleasure to be here, and also because this is a special event or a special edition, it's co-organized with the Ministry of Religious Affairs. And the topic chosen today is crucial and has huge impact on our life and business. There's a lot of talk about AI, and some consider this to be an invisible infrastructure for the future. Whether this is the case remains to be seen, but we know we need to understand what AI is, what it is capable of, and how we can make sure it develops within the boundaries of our values. And this is also why our partnership with Indonesia, and in particular with the Ministry of Religious Affairs, holds such significance, because AI literacy is essential and is only practicable if we understand the world and investigate the values that we hold dear. With the Ministry of Religious Affairs, we have promoted initiatives that bridge faith and action, such as Green Islam, which links environmental stewardship to spiritual responsibility, and interfaith and religious freedom programs that foster understanding across communities. These collaborations reflect our shared conviction that peace, sustainability, and innovation are interdependent. For the Netherlands, religious freedom, innovation, and technological progress are not just policy priorities, they are part of our national identity. We believe that creativity flourishes best in societies where people are free to think, believe, and express themselves without fear. The Netherlands stands ready to continue working hand in hand with Indonesia to build a future where technology is guided by values and where freedom and faith coexist harmoniously, and where innovation becomes a bridge towards a more just, peaceful, and sustainable world. There's a lot of academic collaboration between Indonesia and the Netherlands, and we're really proud of that. Early last month, the higher education and research collaboration between our two countries was celebrated during the Winter Week in Jakarta and in Bogor. During this week, the alumni network called Oranje Alumni Network was launched by the Dutch Minister of Foreign Affairs for all Indonesians who have studied in the Netherlands, whether it's at Leiden, at Groningen, Maastricht, or anywhere else, whether it's at a University of Applied Science, whether it's for a summer course or a full-fledged degree. All alumni are welcome to become a member of this Orange Alumni Network, and we are aiming to offer interesting opportunities for alumni to connect with each other, with the Netherlands, to have professional development opportunities. And as an example, next week there will be an event on Tuesday evening here in Erasmus Huis on high-tech and high-tech opportunities with Dutch businesses, with Dutch universities, and of course with hopefully many of you. So all of you who have studied in Leiden, and I know there are many in this room, please join the alumni network, Oranje Alumni Network. You can find it on LinkedIn. So to conclude, we cherish the excellent collaborations between our countries, and we are committed to shaping a more sustainable and safer world for future generations together. The lecture today enables us to share our perspectives and discuss together the challenges and potential solutions on this important topic. I'm looking very much forward to the presentations that will follow. Thank you very much. Terima kasih.
The first speaker will be the first speech will be delivered by Prof. Sahiron, and let me introduce him first. So Prof. Sahiron received his bachelor degree from UIN Sunan Kalijaga in Jogja and continued his master degree at McGill University in Canada, and he completed his PhD at Otto Friedrich University in Germany. And currently he is the Director of Islamic Higher Education at the Ministry of Religious Affairs. And without further ado, I'm giving the floor to Prof. Sahiron. Please, Pak.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good evening, everybody. We would like to express our gratitude to the Netherlands for academic collaboration. Actually, especially in the Leiden University, we have a program that we call joint research. So it is very useful for us, very important, because that some researchers from Islamic universities in Indonesia can learn much from of course professor from Leiden University. And I think in the MOU is being let's say provided, and I think in few days the MOU can be signed by both, of course, by the Minister of Religious Affairs and by Leiden University. Thank you very much for Pak Marik. We know that the development of computer science, right, move forward significantly in the current decade. And one of the tremendous achievement is artificial intelligence. And with the AI, we can, ask about many things. I think everything that AI can answer our questions, everything. And this is, let's say, AI is very, very important right now for us. For, of course, for lecturers, for students. But I think we have to also pay attention to the ethical one in this case. We know that we can use the AI in academic fields, but I think it's we have to, on the one hand, we can use it, but on the other hand, we have to be careful in this case. And for us, it is very possible that artificial intelligence can be applied to Islamic studies too. So, of course, in various ways, in various ways. For example, artificial intelligence can analyze the Quranic text, Hadith text, and even AI can answer, for example, whether the question of whether this Hadith, the prophetic tradition, can be considered, for example, Sahih. Sahih meaning the strong. Let's say our right and strong, report from the Prophet Muhammad, or da'if, very weak in this. And AI right now can analyze this. I mean, using by attention to, for example, the chains of transmission, and also the mutun, the contents of the prophetic tradition. It is very amazing. The problem probably. So this AI is the a computer system, right? And the computer, the content inside the computer, right? Are put by human beings, right? So, right? So yes, meaning that. In this case, then we have to be careful. I mean, the main question is who put the information in the computer, right? In order that the information, coming from artificial intelligence is, useful and, beneficial for our life, then those who are very good in artificial intelligence must be, or must work together with those who are very good in Islamic studies, and meaning that, and also those who are good people, good people. Then, so this is the our challenge, I think. Our challenge in this case. The experts in Islamic studies and also in other aspects must be very active in giving research results and also good insight in order to that we can on the one side can receive much knowledge or many sciences, but on the other hand, we have to also preserve our life in a harmonious way, and then of course in a good way. Okay, thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Again, thank you, Prof. Sairon, for your insights. And now we are moving to the second presenter. She is Dr. Baik Hana Susanti from UIN Syarif Hidayatullah, Jakarta. And what is interesting from her is she is the co-founder behind the Artificial Intelligence Center Indonesia, or IG. And I believe we are going to hear a lot about this organization from Dr. Baik.
Terima kasih. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Oke, kalau Bapak Ibu ingat November 2022, apa yang terjadi? November 22 di dunia AI. 2022. Oh, belum tahu. Oke, lahirnya ChatGPT, Bapak Ibu. Oke, so after November 22, our life is totally changing, right? Jadi AI kemudian menjadi primadona. You know primadona Pak Dubes? Oh, no, oke, baik. Jadi saya tidak usah terjemahkan. Jadi setelah itu kemudian terjadi disrupted, terjadi transformation, ya, terutama dan salah satu yang terbesar perubahannya itu ada di dunia pendidikan. Oke, jadi artificial intelligence is not going away, gitu ya. Jadi AI is an will transport society, kita tahu sendiri, education, and also they will changing the world. And now it happened, ya. Kemudian yang kita tidak tahu, what we don't know exactly how an AI can interrupt our life, how the AI can change our education life, how an AI can change everything in our life. Ya, dari kita baru bangun sampai kita mau tidur, we depend on an AI. Oke, jadi pagi kita bangun pasti ngecek Instagram dulu. Ya, bapak-bapak, ibu-ibu, ada yang masih muda. Even kita setiap hari lewat jalan sama, kita selalu ingin buka Maps dulu. Right? Setelah itu baru pesanan ya Bu, baru lihat Shopee, kapan ini mau diantar ini barang gitu ya. Jadi itu sudah merubah yang tidak pernah kita lakukan dulu sekarang menjadi berubah. Terutama di bidang pendidikan. So actually AI brings great opportunities, also AI also brings significant risk. Terutama ke our students. First kita lihat adanya adaptive and personalized learning should be. Jadi setelah adanya AI, so many application kita sudah bangun begitu. Jadi sebenarnya learning, Pak Direktur, should be personalized. We don't have to know everything, but all narrow, right? Tapi sepertinya kita harus mulai mempersonalize learning. How can we personalize learning? We have to know our student exactly. Ya, who is our students? Okay, so dengan AI kita bisa menjelajah itu. From the beginning kita sudah tahu ini anak harus belajar A, B, C, D. Okay. Kemudian adaptive, whatever lah yang berkembang di dunia AI, our students should be adaptive. Ya, mungkin kita tidak usah bermimpi untuk membuat gitu ya seperti ChatGPT, kemudian bikin Sora seperti sekarang Vio yang setiap hari berubah. No need. But we have to prepare our students to be ready and to adaptive. Everything lah yang changing, but they have to be an adaptive to the technology. Yang kedua, automated marking and feedback. Nah, ini tadi yang kita banyak diskusi di luar tadi, ya. Jadi sekarang feedback and also segala macam students kita pakai AI. Are we ready to that? Are we ready to have the feedback for them? Kita kasih feedback, dia masukin lagi di ChatGPT. Dia kirim lagi ke dosennya, ya kan? Jadi kita berkejaran between us as a lecturer and student sebagai pengguna ChatGPT and also any generative AI. Yang ketiga, AR and VR. You know, sekarang sudah hampir semua praktikum gitu Bapak Ibu sekarang they have VR corner. Jadi they not need a lab gitu ya, but they use a VR corner. Before they go to the lab, they should go to the VR corner and do some exercise there. After they get some point, say 85 point, baru dia pergi ke lab. So that will increase dia biaya lab itu more than 30%. Okay. Kemudian ada AI Power Dashboard for Learner Analytics. Nah ini Bapak Ibu, setiap hari kita berhadapan dengan itu. So guru juga harus tahu. Dashboard harus dia paham untuk dia menganalisis siswanya, mahasiswanya, not only at the final or UTS text, but also the process, right? Karena kalau saya pribadi, mohon maaf ini opini Bapak Ibu, saya lebih percaya evaluasi proses dibandingkan dengan evaluasi hasil yang hanya kita lihat satu semester sekali. So our teachers and lecturers also need the power dashboard untuk menganalisis learnernya. Yang ketiga misalnya content generation. Kita harus jujur Bapak Ibu, yang jadi guru sekarang yang jadi dosen adalah influencer. Right? Ya, am I correct? Ya, pasti. Correct atau correct, benar atau benar gitu. Because you know our students use on social media is more than to talk with us, right? Screen time is now is more than our social time. Jadi gurunya, orang tuanya adalah influencer. So apapun yang dia serap is depend on the influencer. Nah, di situ sebenarnya kita harus hadir Bapak Ibu. Karena tadi mungkin sudah disampaikan oleh Pak Direktur, how can they analyze the fake and not fake news? Teacher and learning assistance. Kemudian dia juga punya significant risk tentu tadi ya, screen time and social time itu sudah sangat kecil, sangat besar perbandingannya. Mungkin di US ya Pak sudah ada satu area taman gitu, jadi nggak boleh no phone. Jadi pas kita masuk taman, HP kita disita gitu, ditaruh. Nah, mungkin nanti di kampus-kampus perlu Pak Dir. Jadi ada area gitu kan, tidak boleh ada HP, dititip. Jadi di situ diskusi lah, ngobrol lah atau apapun gitu, even tidur gitu. Yang penting jangan main HP dulu sebentar gitu. Jadi kenapa? Karena itu student kita using an AI, especially Gen AI itu sangat banyak menyita waktu dibanding social time-nya. Kemudian students more likely to use an AI at home than in classroom. Di sekolah nggak boleh bawa HP Bapak Ibu, tapi pas pulang ya udah. Kan Pak Din belum pulang, jadi anaknya bebas pakai HP. Oke, dan seterusnya. Oke. Nah, ini kemudian Bapak Ibu di dunia pendidikan, we divided the AI in education two kinds. Satu AI tools. Right? Jadi AI tools, any kind of tools that using AI, not only a Gen AI, but also some more type of an AI. Ya, kita taruh di tools AI tools, kemudian increasing human intelligence. Why? Because tadi kata Bapak, whatever AI ada itu is depend on the knowledge, kalau kita informasi yang ada di belakang. Waktu kebetulan Bapak Ibu ini saya sama Pak Marik dan Pak Bart waktu itu ke Maroko Pak ya. Kita diskusi di sana 3 hari 3 malam, kesimpulannya satu Bapak Ibu, if we are talking about an AI, we are talking not about the technology but about the people, right? Jadi peoples-nya yang harus dididik, harus disiapkan. Jangan kayak smartphone ya Bapak Ibu, yang smartphone-nya kita apaan? Enggak ya. Yang ketiga adalah learning about an AI literacy. Tadi juga Pak Direktur sudah menjelaskan. Nah, untuk itu Bapak Ibu kita call-nya sebutnya 4D AI strategy framework. Satu, governance and ethics. Nah, tadi juga Bapak sudah, apalagi di pendidikan Islam ya Pak, ethics menjadi sangat penting. Also governance. Iteratif ya. Iterative unit application ini kita mau pakai di mana gitu. Karena tidak semua AI cocok di semua tempat. Ya, itu sangat tergantung pada kondisi dan situasi di tempat itu. Kemudian teknologi and data ini yang kita kurang Bapak Ibu. Ya, kita mau bikin AI datanya nggak ada Pak Dir. Ya, jadi kalau kita mau bikin AI ya datanya harus ada. Data is a treasure now, sangat mahal harganya. Ya, nanti saya cerita sedikit apa yang kami lakukan di IG. Kemudian staff capability, again AI literacy. Oke, ini satu kita punya collaborating with universities. Apa yang kita lakukan di sana? Kita develop some AI centers. AI center itu kita siapkan apa? Satu, knowledge roadmap. It depend on you. Gitu ya, tujuannya apa, goalsnya apa. Kalau UIN Imam Bonjol Padang, we have a collaboration with the Faculty of Science and Technology. So tujuannya adalah mengembangkan center ini supaya bisa bermanfaat untuk mahasiswa ya sebagai labnya, and also untuk mengembangkan developing some application. Kemudian kerjasama dengan otomasi sistem for the local government dan lain sebagainya. Tapi di UIN Sultan Maulana Hasanuddin Banten itu di Faculty of Tarbiyah Bapak dan Ibu. Jadi fokusnya adalah mendirikan AI Center ini untuk pembelajaran. Jadi tujuannya nanti untuk melatih guru, melatih mahasiswa dan sebagainya Pak. Nah, ini yang kita siapkan, ada knowledge roadmap, curriculum, teaching materials, learning modules, media, learning strategies, and also learning evaluation. Semua ini based on AI ya Bapak Ibu, jadi learning evaluation-nya itu kita pakai AI juga. Oke, jadi Bapak misalnya punya program PPG ya Pak Dir, itu sekian juta orang gitu. Saya pernah Pak ngajar PPG, peer teaching, ya, online. Ibu-ibu Bapak guru tuh mengirim video Pak. Satu guru 10 menit. You can imagine if I have 100 of students, we have to see 100 of videos 10 minutes. Oh my God, itu kayaknya di luar, ya, di luar kemampuan kita. Supaya objektif ya, Pak. So, we develop some application to evaluate the teaching proses, gitu. Jadi, Bapak Ibu guru hanya mengirim link untuk videonya, and then nanti our engine yang akan mengenerate. Kemudian training for lecture, tadi Dipan sudah saya katakan bahwa VR and AR now menjadi sesuatu yang kebutuhan yang membuat kita bisa menghemat bahan habis pakai sangat banyak, 30%. Video generator tadi untuk meng-create engine gitu ya. Kemudian AI tools nanti saya jelaskan di belakang, and training of trainers atau TOT to the teachers and lecturers. Oke, kemudian ini AI application development and learning collaboration with UI. Tapi kalau untuk ini kita kolaborasi dengan Science and Technopark. Ya, Science Technopark UI. Jadi kita sedang menyiapkan similarity checker Bapak Ibu. Jadi bukan untuk mendandingi Turnitin, tapi agar bisa diakses oleh teman-teman yang tidak punya kemampuan untuk subscribe di Turnitin. Karena Turnitin quite mahal ya, so expensive. Jadi kita coba create similarity checker Bapak Padir. Ini juga kalau diizinkan, kami sekarang sedang mencoba untuk trial and errornya Pak. Jadi similarity checker ini kita bisa klaim pakai AI. Jadi even itu bentuk, kemudian formula, dan lain-lain itu bisa dicek. Yang sekarang belum bisa dilakukan oleh Turnitin. Kemudian ada WhatsApp bot, tadi Pak Dir sudah bilang bahwa semua hal kita bisa lakukan dengan AI. WhatsApp bot ini kita dedikasikan terutama untuk teman-teman yang kalau langganan WA itu sangat mahal ya Pak, WA premium. Right? Jadi sekitar 500.000 sebulan dipakai tidak dipakai. Jadi kita coba WhatsApp bot ini, dan ini bisa misalnya katakan Pak Dir, misalnya sekarang lagi ada Airfans. WhatsApp bot bikin aja dengan satu nomor, kita bisa bikinkan everything about this activity atau this event, kita taruh sana. Selesai event, putus, selesai. Jadi nggak masalah, itu WhatsApp bot. Kemudian yang menarik sekarang karena ada isu inklusivisme Bapak dan Ibu, jadi sekarang kita lagi create AI for special needs students. Dari mulai apa? Dari mulai dia TK, SD, SMP, SMA sampai perguruan tinggi. Nah ini AI Talent for College, kita kerjasama dengan Kementerian Pendidikan Dikti dulu gitu ya, kita dari 2022 sampai 2024 kurang lebih ada 750 alumni Pak yang sudah selesai di AI Talent for College ini. Kita menyediakan 8 modul, kemudian mereka ada di IC selama 6 bulan Pak, 1 semester, itu semua online. Kita kebetulan udah punya LMS-nya namanya IC Academy gitu ya, dan hasil dari AI Talents ini mereka bikin project dan sekarang sudah banyak yang diinkubasi oleh beberapa perusahaan. Dan itu kita bisa mencetak entrepreneur muda dari kalangan pendidikan tinggi. Saya pikir kalau misalnya mau diadopsi oleh Bapak itu kita sudah sangat siap. Collaboration with pesantren Pak. Nah, pesantren ini kita baru mulai Bapak Ibu. Terus terang IC itu berdiri 2019 tapi fully open di 2023. Jadi sekarang baru kita mulai dengan teman-teman pesantren. Kebetulan Pak, kami didukung oleh satu lokal distrik di Jombang. Jadi Pemda Jombang itu karena namanya kota santri Bapak Ibu ya. Jadi beliau ingin mengembangkan santri AI tapi lewat pesantren. Nah ini kita lakukan. Satu, kita meng-create Bapak Ibu so many application. Jadi ada Al-Huda, ada Al-Lugo, ada Atarik, ada Asafar VR dan lain sebagainya ya. Jadi ini untuk membantu teman-teman di pesantren untuk mempelajari, untuk belajar tapi dengan menggunakan AI gitu biar asik gitu Pak. Kemudian terakhir Mas, nah ini juga kita berusaha untuk bagaimana pesantren bisa mengajarkan AI tapi tidak melanggar aturan dalam tanda petik, because some pesantrens didn't allow the santri to use a digital. Yeah, so we create some special curriculum. We call this an offline program and also unplugged system. And then satu lagi saya lagi ini Pak Bart nih, AI moving lab and AI floating lab. Jadi karena pesantren kita banyak Bapak Ibu, jadi kita bikin labnya di mobil aja. Jadi bukan anak-anak pesantren yang harus datang ke kami gitu ke center, tapi kita yang datang ke pesantren. Nah ini ada 3 Ada yang offline dan juga ada yang unplugged system. Unplugged system ini baru Bapak Ibu, how to teach a students about an AI without using a digital tools gitu. Karena nggak boleh kan di pesantren. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Baik for sharing lot of interesting stuff that I believe will revolutionize Islamic higher education in Indonesia. Professor Bart Barendrecht is a professor of digital anthropology at the Leiden Institute of Cultural Anthropology and Sociology, as well as the UNESCO chair of the anthropology of, digital diversity. And currently he's the principal investigator of the NWO VICI Project One Among Zeros towards an anthropology of everyday AI in Islam. I believe we are going to hear a lot of interesting stories from Prof. Bart. The time is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Goedenavond, selamat malam. I'm going to talk a little bit using the title Freeing Up the Future. Pa Mark was already so kind to remind us that we are commemorating here Cleveringa. Professor Cleveringa, who did a famous protest speech when the occupation just started, a walkout, a strike of our students, more or less representing for us as a Leiden academic community what a stand of moral courage would be. Now, those are very big feet to fill, very big shoes to fill, I would say. But what I'm going to try and do here is more or less depict what courage in 2025 may look like. So this is my protest speech. Of course, I can't stand in the shadow of something to compare. But what can we at least show what courage today is? And for me, it would be very much like learning to critically read and rewrite how our tomorrows will look like, what the future will look like. And why? Because I think our futures are very much dominated by powers that are beyond ours, that we don't control. Hey, we're living on a planet together with AI. Some people are afraid that AI is taking over soon. And some people talk about the singularity. Somewhere in 2047, artificial intelligence will outsmart us. I don't think it will be happening that soon. But we have to relate ourselves to this thing that is called AI. And ironically enough, the way we talk about AI is as if it is an entity, a being, if it has agency. And I think we should be very careful with that. I'm not so much interested in the question, what is AI going to do to us in the decades to come? What is it that we will be doing with AI? I think that's very important. We have some very powerful tools in our hands. But how are we going to use it? And especially what kind of futures do we want to define for ourselves and we are willing to build with AI? And if I say futures, I'm mostly going to talk about the futures of Indonesia, your future, but also what can we together talk about collectively? And what are the kind of futures for Indonesia, with Indonesia as a partner? And something that I will very much stress is this kind of South-South-North dialogue. And I will get back to that. We are not in this alone. We have partners. There's a lot of people that we can talk about in opening up the future and see what we can do. And because the big problem, if we talk about the future, is that it is already colonized. It is already occupied. People were there before us. Big tech was there before us and have been claiming things. And the work that I'm very much using is by a British Pakistani Muslim critic, a futurist himself, Saudin Sardar. Some of you may be familiar with his work. He spent a long time in Kuala Lumpur with the neighbors, teaching there. He wrote a famous article in 1993 already warning us that the future is already taken by other people, by other forces, and mostly by technocentric ideas. It's taken by people that very much look like me. White males that very much have been claiming what the future will be looking like, leaving out a lot of others that are not partaking the kind of dialogue what the future may look like. And so my call to action, my protest speech then would be, can we dare to imagine a future which is at least otherwise, which we can open up? If we don't do so, others will do for us. And BT, it's not a Korean band, but it's big tech. If we don't dare to think for ourselves, big tech will do it for us and claim that future, I would say. And so let's look at other possible dialogues. between the Global South and the Global North. Within the Global South, there's a lot of conversations to be held. I would say, let's not talk about technology only, but let's bring in other things. And there's a lot of talk about ethics if we talk about technology. Whereas for most of humankind, we don't talk ethics. We live by religion. We live by traditions. And so we have completely other moral values than immediately calling it ethics. And so I like the idea some colleagues are using this term ancestral intelligence instead of artificial intelligence. And can we rely on other ideas to at least open up that future? And that's my invitation to you, because I think Islam is an important moral tradition that should be partaking in the dialogue. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to turn AI into something Islamic, but I think you should be part of the dialogue at least, and what it looks like. And I think there's like a big task for you as a Muslim majority country. And what the future may look like, AI is the key to that future. Don't feel offended by this picture. I will get back to it. Like I know there's a lot of things wrong with this picture, but I will say what this is about in a moment. Why AI and Islam? If you talk about AI and Islam, there's actually a lot of similarities. I think both have their own black boxes. The AI is famously depicted as the big black box problem. And the algorithm, we know how it works. Or we know that it works. We don't know how it works. And we ask ChatGPT something and magically something comes out. And we don't even know how it's produced. Take the Facebook algorithm. No one on earth really knows how it is working. It's by now like 600 designers who have been involved, and everyone knows a little bit, but nobody knows exactly how these things work. And the Kaaba's sacred not knowing is different, I would say, from the algorithms not knowing. And we both don't know what's inside, but they work by very different rules and prescriptions. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that an algorithm is the Kaaba. Not at all. Don't want to say that. Don't want to go there. But they have a similar effect on people. And that's interesting. They orient our lives in every day, you could say. And increasingly so, AI is doing that as well. And the big difference, of course, is that the sacred, you don't know what's inside, but it begs for humility, modesty. Simply because we don't know what's inside, we know we are small as humans, and we learn how to behave. A black box, an algorithm, is something completely different, I would say. And we shouldn't be treating it with modesty. We shouldn't be like seeing it as a sacred thing. No, it should be working for us. It's human-made. And I think there's a big difference there. And we oftentimes tend to forget that. Now, we anthropologists, I'm an anthropologist, we like to study these practices. And how this power, this mystique of the black box, what it's doing in daily life. And sometimes the black box, of course, doesn't work. Like if you look at the Kaaba, you see what is wrong. People walk completely the wrong way. It is a bit weird. So you can ask like whatever you will to OpenAI, it's not going to produce you a picture of the Kaaba in which people walk counterclockwise. They keep on walking the other way. And which shows we are still very far from artificial intelligence that is going to outmaneuver us. That's going to be smarter than us, I would say. We started 4 or 5 years ago this Leiden-based project, One Among the Zeros, towards an everyday AI of Muslim Southeast Asia, looking at what AI looks like in 3 domains. And what we do there is not so much like very sophisticated AI, something that is super high-tech, but what is the kind of AI we already are living with? And Bhusanti was already referring to Shopee, Gojek, and those are the AIs that are already in our life, I would say. And for me, they are not innocent. Using those technologies, we are prototyping the future. We are experimenting with technological futures already. And so we should be very much considering what we are doing here, using those technologies and letting them into our lives. And what are the kind of ethical dilemmas that we run into? Now, we will focus on 3 fields in our project: education, governance, creativity. Education, I think most of you are in education, so that's not too far off. Scholars, your colleagues, you yourself already may be experimenting with the drafting of sermons. The khutbah is happening. I have good colleagues from Malaysia working with Sharia consultancies, already using ChatGPT. Works quite okay, you could say. but also curation of organizational resources. The most famous being Chatmu, GPT, Muaddia, developing its own sources, putting them into a large language model so you can consult them. And our students, using it for translation, assignments, making videos, summarizing things, great tool. We're looking at governance, both top-down and bottom-up. For example, in Singapore, how MUIS is using apps to surveil on its Muslim minorities, for example, in Singapore, but also self-disciplination apps. Halal scanners, where can you find halal restaurants? Not so much, I think, important if you live in a Muslim majority country like Indonesia, but in Singapore may work out quite fine. And creativity. I think that's interesting because Prof. Sairon, that was very much a message from the ministry. Busanti very much starts from education. I thought, let's say a little bit more about creativity in the age of AI. And what that for Muslims may look like in Southeast Asia. Last week I was in Malaysia. And just to give you an example of what's going on, IPO Music Symposium. IPO is the World Musical Heritage Sites, and city vibrant, a lot of music being made there. But this year's theme was Nasheed music, Islamic anthems. Not as popular anymore in Indonesia, but very big still, I would say, in Malaysia. And I decided to start with using a small app that you may know, Suno. I'm looking especially at the students, the younger part of the audience. Jerry, you know. But I decided, let's make in 5 seconds a Nasheed song. So I asked, ChatGPT, please can you do me a Malay pantun on how Nasheed music will survive AI? 2 seconds, I had something, rhyme scheme, A, B, A, B. And then put it into Suno saying, can you do me a harmonious a cappella voice? And here it was. Audience completely shocked, of course. How is this possible? This Dutch guy, 5 seconds making a Nasheed song. We are out of employment. We can do nothing anymore. Which was interesting, because it got people talking about what Nasheed music is meant to be. And what it authentically should be doing. And there's a whole century of Nasheed music using different technologies. And it is mostly about a cappella music. You only use the voice, which is God-given. But what happens if a large language model is taking that over? All Nasheed artists will sing it's not about what you sing. There's a lot of possibilities in text, but how you sing, the niyat, the intention. And so you can do in 5 seconds a Nasheed song, but is there real niyat there? Is there real intention? A lot of people would doubt that. They would say this is soulless music. This doesn't have a roch. And which again is interesting because I think we shouldn't be too cynical. This opens also a lot of possibilities. If you look at Nasheed music, there is da'wah to be done. So if I can do da'wah in 5 seconds, what would be the problem? There's a lot of possibilities. You can preserve musical heritage. But people still tend to be very anxious about it. Second example. Ethical prompting. We looked at text to sound just before. This is text to image. There's a whole lot to do about housewives, teachers, people who don't have any background in ICTs, but trying to look for the perfect Islamic image. Using Midjourney, DALL-E, and see what they can produce. The most famous example by now is this, Al Ais or Rafa, which was made by a Malaysian housewife just experimenting. It went viral. It is taken up everywhere. Should you be doing things like the Alam Gaib is one. There's a lot of people now trying to prompt for, can you do me a jinn or a kuntilanak? Which is very much okay. They are out there, but should you be visualizing them? Or the paradise. That's interesting. There's a lot of YouTube videos now with AI-generated paradise, what that may look like. Which brings you to a lot of ethical dilemmas, you could say. Now, for me, that's very interesting that it's not so much about what technology can do. I don't know about AI technology, how it works. Busanti, I also don't think you know a lot how it exactly works. What can it do for humans? How can we push its limits and get it to work for us? I'm also a UNESCO chair. Mas Aka was already referring to that. I'm very much interested in this idea of digital diversity. It is this anxiety that once we go on the internet, we all will be doing the same thing. We will be uniform. And once you use Facebook, we all will be talking the same language, which I doubt. And for me, there's a whole lot of diversity out there on the internet still. There was predicted that we all would talk English in no time. Far from the truth. And there's a lot of language still being spoken on the internet. And I just briefly wanted to touch upon 3 things that I felt are very important for the debate here on AI and Islam in Indonesia. Ethics, ownership, literacy, future literacy, to work towards a future in which we can still have faith. Double pun intended, I would say. Ethics. What if we know that a quarter of this planet is living by a moral tradition that is called Islam? Why not mobilize it if we want to make AI work better for us? And don't get me wrong, I'm myself a UNESCO chair. I do my best to work on the UNESCO recommendations for AI ethics, but the moment you talk about ethics, the room is empty. It's far too abstract. People don't want to talk about ethics. It's a very complicated thing. But if you tell them, look, it's your religion which tells you to behave online, to use an AI modestly, it's something completely else. People start listening and become interesting. And so that for me will be a recommendation. Indonesia is now working on this roadmap for AI, the third incarnation. But this one seems to be very serious and talking about ethics regulation as well. Please take into account that there's also local wisdoms, religion which you may tap into, and which may do the trick much better than, let's say, impose an ethical framework from the outside again. And why not think in adab, your manners, your etiquette? Please honestly say if you're using AI, don't do hate speech, don't do hoax. And your religion is telling you not to do so, for example. Don't do haram things. That is also still part of adab. Nia, please be modest in what you're using AIs for. And know your limits as well. You don't have to use, I would say, AI for everything. And tabayun, the principle of verification. Please do check, whenever you're using something, cross-check. And what are the sources here that you're citing? And that's a religious task, you could say, which works much better than, I would say, ethics that you're imposing from the outside. Ownerships. Ethics are really nice, but there's a lot of ethical protocols out there. That is the UNESCO regulation. There is a Lahore Declaration for the use of Islamic principles in AI. But ethics are only going to work if people are also in control, we have learned. If they really have the means to do so. And I think the big problem Indonesia is looking at, Indonesian Islam is looking at, infrastructure is very expensive. And just building some data centers is really expensive, but it's not your big problem. Data is your problem. And from where to get the data to train your LLMs. Future literacy. The skills that all tie it together, I always say. This is a definition by UNESCO. Future literacy for UNESCO would mean the capacity to imagine multiple futures out there, but use them in the here and now. If you're talking about the future that's already colonized by others, occupied by others, please act in the here and now. Let's not wait. Now, we started with some of that. Busanti was referring to that in Rabat, Morocco, last month, I think it was. Time is flying. Simple, doable local skills. And that you could use in Pesantren, that you could use in Madrasa, that you could use in UIN, for example. But based on Islamic principles. Practices like prompt rhetoric, and just realizing, telling your students, just what you're typing into ChatGPT isn't magic. There's human thinking going in there, so please be careful how you phrase things. And you want to trickle the imagination, for example, by a example that you can give, like, please summarize this hadith for a teenage public, and now do it for a sensational boulevard press-like kind of outlet. How would that be different? What does it do to hadith, for example? And just to show what a large language model is actually doing. And you want to do like model critique labs, bias hunts, like let them look at certain tafsir traditions within Southeast Asia, let them do exercises, but see what is missing. What are the gaps? And where is it taking its data from? Again, I think Prof. Sayron was referring to that. It's mostly taking its data from places like Germany, where people have the power to digitize Islamic manuscripts. And so there's a big task out there. And you may want to work on something like an AI nutrition label. What's actually there? And what is going on in the AI? If you are asking a large language model, please keep track of what you're doing, how you have been changing. And like our focus is always on the final outcome, the prompting is very important, I would say. And learn students how to prompt, learn how to verify. And this Tabayun principle can be very important.
Thank you very much, Pak Bart, thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Yeah, for sharing a lot of examples of the intrusion of AI into our everyday life, into music, nasyid, art, education. Okay, I think we still have about 20 minutes before we end the session. Yeah, feel free if you want to ask questions.
My name is Yeri from Universitas Multimedia Nusantara in Tangerang. I'd like to hear about your opinions, all of you. There's a term called techno-jahiliyah. There's a tendency among our society to see technology either as a neutral or tend to be secular. So do you think this kind of perspective tend to be limiting our imagination, how to embrace AI, to utilize AI for religious purposes, for good, or something like that? That's all, thank you.
We know in Islam, we know the sanad. Every we say something, we always to say our sanad. It is so interesting in AI era because I cannot imagine if in the future the people atau Muslim itu ketika menyampaikan sesuatu sanadnya itu rawahu AI. I think it's very interesting. Dan saya mohon pendapat dari narasumber. Thank you very much.
How can Islamic ethical perspective help use redesign AI system that are not only smart but also just, especially for women who are often misrepresented or invisible in digital space? Thank you.
I think the first question about the neutrality of technology, maybe Prof. Bart can answer that one.
As an anthropologist, I don't believe in neutral. I think whatever we are inventing, we are putting human meaning in it. We're investing in it. Of course, the interesting thing is that AI, when it's just recently invented, we are not sure yet what it will become. So you see the struggle over meanings. A lot of people are trying to invest. It will become this, it will become that. AI will set us free. AI will democratize. AI will subject us. We don't know yet. It can run in all sorts of directions. I don't believe it's neutral or secular for the simple idea that if you listen to people doing the design of AI technology, it has this very spiritual ring to it, a very religious ring to it. They like to talk in very religious terms about AI. With AI, for example, we don't need theories anymore. We just put in a lot of data, and big data will set us free. Salvation through big data, which for me is a total theological idea. That there's some sort of authority, almost magical authority, which will come out. The whole idea of an AI apocalypse. At a certain time, AI will take over and poof, the world will implode. A very Christian idea, I would say. And looking at what I call the cult of AI, it almost has religious proportions as well. With designers which are like the upper top ulama saying like how AI should be handled, and then there's people that just need to follow. And people are interpreting for us. So in a lot of ways, I would say this is not secular at all, but very religious what is happening. But can we at least make it known to the world that this is happening? I don't have a problem that this is a religious thing, but at least we should be openly talking about these things then as well, that there are certain meanings which are already privileged in those technologies. So I'm not sure, Jerry, if that answers your question a little bit, but no, technology is never secular, absolutely not.
The second question is about sanad. I think it is best answered by Prof. Sahiro.
Yes, it is very common in pesantren, that we have sanad, that change of transmission of narration. For example, we yeah, we got this knowledge, for example, from my teacher named blah blah blah, and so my teacher, receive it from his teacher, and so on and so forth. It's very normal. It's very common in pesantren world, yeah, in pesantren, right? And in the future, in relation to artificial intelligence, I would like to invite many experts in technology, artificial intelligence, for example, and those who are very good, for example, in Arabic text or in Islamic studies. So, and these people will, create a robot that are given, let's say, a text from At-Tabari, for example, or Az-Zamakhshari. The robot can speak on behalf of At-Tabari or Kiai siapa gitu. Jadi ke depan nanti ini saya akan mengundang ahli teknologi dan ahli Islam Studies membuat robot yang kalau ditanya tolong coba interpretasinya At-Tabari terhadap ayat ini, surat ini, ayat ini. Dia ngomong. Nah, jadi the people will input Jami'ul Bayan fi Tafsiril Quran, the book written by At-Tabari, and the people will create voices on behalf of At-Tabari or on behalf of Zamakhshari, and so on and so forth. Tapi ini tuh robot yang ngomong. Nah, kita pakai komputer sistemnya, kita masukkan misalnya Al-Fatihah ayat 1 itu kita baca At-Tabari, tapi sudah diterjemahkan bahasa Indonesia atau langsung bahasa Arab, bahasa Indonesia atau bahasa Inggris, tapi isinya semuanya At-Tabari. Jadi satu robot itu adalah we create a new At-Tabari, new Tabari, new person, atau Ihya Ulumuddin. Robot, lalu ini isinya tuh Ihya Ulumuddin semua. Tolong dong, khusyuk itu apa definisinya menurut Al-Ghazali. Kemudian robot soalnya it will answer our question in relation to Ihya Ulumuddin. Ini lagi saya berpikir ini. Nanti ke depan itu kan ada robotisasi. Nah, itu yang Islamic Studies bisa berperan di situ, membuat robot-robot, muncul At-Tabari baru, Az-Zamakhshari baru, Ihya Ulumuddin berarti Al-Ghazali baru, Gus Syafiq ilmunya diambil maunya begitu, bisa saja kayak begitu. Jadi ini peran kita nih di PT KIN. Silakan membuat artificial intelligence lain, ada yang Shopee, ada yang ini, ada yang itu, ada yang macam-macam, terserah, ya kan? And we are interested in creating robots that are very good in certain sciences or knowledge or whatsoever.
Baik, sebenarnya sih kalau secara teori Pak, sumber data yang harus kita benar-benar validasi gitu ya. Jadi sumber akurasinya itu ya karena ini sanad ya Pak, nggak bisa bermain-main kita gitu ya. Nah, sumber datanya ini yang harus benar-benar tervalidasi. Secara teori kita bisa bikin apa aja dengan AI gitu ya. Bapak Ibu, yang paling berat mengembangkan ini Pak Dir, kalau teks gampang, suara yang susah. Karena ada rasa di situ. Nah, itu nggak bisa Pak. Yang bisa ditiru AI itu dari leher ke atas Pak. Bisa mikir dia, bisa mengenerate apapun yang masuk. Tapi kalau dari leher ke bawah dia nggak bisa. Perasaan, rasa, ya. Kalau itu ada suara. Because the sanad is not sound, right? It's not nada, tapi rasa. Nada dia bisa tiru, but rasa no. Belum, ya I don't know nanti ya. Ya, jadi tapi ini sebenarnya challenge Pak. Challenge sebenarnya gitu. Misalnya tulisan kitab kuning itu pakai Google Lens juga bisa gitu. Tapi rasanya kan beda Pak. Teorinya bisa Mas, Tapi mungkin akan agak repot ya kalau kita tidak punya sumber data yang tervalidasi. Siapa yang memvalidasi, berapa banyak data yang harus kita validasi, itu mungkin tantangannya. Kalau sumber datanya ada, saya pikir oke ya, bisa ya. Silakan Pak.
Mudah-mudahan bisa. Tambahannya sedikit karena memang bukan hanya masalahnya itu, tapi orang lain yang punya modalnya, seperti di Gulf State-nya yang bisa ini kumpulin datanya semua, mereka tidak akan mikirkan itu soalnya kitab kuning. Dibikin itu Islam GPT, tapi lama-lamanya yang ngomong bicaranya di atas Islamnya, itu bukan orang Indonesia lagi atau kitab kuning, tapi data lainnya.
Yeah, it's really very interesting discussion. Yeah, also very interesting idea from Padir, from Prof. Sairon regarding this idea to create robot. I think Prof. Bart can use this idea to apply for Mora Air Funds. We have Padir, we have Pak Nur Kafid here. Actually, we still have the last question regarding the Islamic ethical principles in technology. And I think all of the speakers can answer this last question and also provide a closing statement, maybe from Pak.
Yes, of course. Yeah, first of all, those who are very good in Islamic ethics must be very active in this case in relation to the artificial intelligence. Yeah, you can, you can give some information through internet or whatsoever. Give some information about Islamic ethic, and also of course, ya ini tantangan bagi kita. Sering sekali kita tidak aktif itu ya di mana-mana ya kan. Padahal ini seluruh informasi yang sudah ada di internet itu masuk di computer system. Nah kalau kita yang baik-baik, nih sampean kan baik-baik semua nih, kita tidak aktif, itu ya sudah yang memasukin itu siapa itu. Makanya kalau validasi and right, authentic, akurat atau tidaknya ketika berbicara. Jadi you have to, I think you are good people and you have to be active. You must be active in this case. Jangan diam saja, pokoknya kita yang hebat-hebat itu ya. Gitu. Terima kasih. Thank you.
Oke, baik, kalau kita berbicara ethics di AI sebenarnya jujur gitu ya, tidak ada yang melanggar apa yang kita pahami sebagai etika in Islam. Jadi so many prinsip gitu ya di ethic of AI, ada yang dari UNESCO, ada yang dari Eropa dan segala macam. Sekarang dari Ristek juga sudah menerapkan, sudah mengembangkan juga etika untuk penggunaan Gen AI di perguruan tinggi, Bapak Ibu juga beberapa universitas Islam. Saya pikir kalau ethics itu tidak hanya untuk Islam gitu ya, karena etika yang kita pakai selama ini untuk mengajarkan AI, untuk mendevelop AI itu tidak ada yang khususon untuk Islam gitu, nggak ada, karena prinsipnya sama. Akurasi, tidak bias, kemudian transparansi, kemudian kebermanfaatan untuk masyarakat gitu ya. Jadi itu general value sepertinya kalau etik itu gitu. Dan kalau yang kami lakukan Bu untuk ethics ini, kami tidak memberikannya as a knowledge, tapi kita praktekkan pada saat proses. Jadi kalau kita mengajarkan anak AI itu kita tidak memasukkan ethics ini sebagai as a knowledge, enggak. Tapi kita berusaha untuk memasukkan the value of ethics ini ke dalam proses pembelajarannya. Contoh misalnya kalau kami gitu ya tidak ada project gitu ya di AI ini yang dikerjakan sendiri. Semuanya berkelompok. Jadi di situ kita berusaha untuk mencoba mencampur siswa kita begitu ya, supaya mereka terbiasa untuk saling mendengar, saling menghargai, kemudian terbuka, kemudian inklusif, kemudian juga tidak bias gender terutama gitu ya. Jadi kalau etika ini bisa umum lah gitu ya, umum. Either itu untuk Islam, non-Islam, saya pikir untuk ethics in AI itu sama. Gitu sih Pak Bart, silakan Pak.
Yeah, I have nothing to add wise words, I would say. Not like, I think we shouldn't be spending too much time about thinking about ethical protocols, because ethical protocols are as good as the people using them. But how to implement, like how we really can live up to it. And of course, one thing is the industry, like how you get the industry to really believe and live up to the kind of ethics that we impose on them. I think that's very important. But how to have our school kids, the future leaders, indeed, realizing this is needed.
Menarik kesimpulan dari sanad yang disampaikan di pertanyaan kedua, lebih kepada bagaimana ketika kita kehilangan titik konsep ijtihad manusiawi dan barokah ilmu yang selama ini menjadi pondasi transmisi pengetahuan Islam. Karena ya itu tadi tradisi Islam yang memang menurut ya maksudnya mohon maaf ya, maksudnya menurut Arum tuh itu lebih kenapa kita selalu berbondong-bondong untuk bertemu dengan profesor, bertemu dengan guru-guru kita, karena di sana barokah ilmunya dibanding kita mencari ChatGPT. Itu yang Arum merasakan ya, mohon maaf. So the second question, what I have writes about the data from Professor Bart, you calls about treasure trove is still extremely controlled. Islamic manuscript dated by Germans, Arabic LMS from Qatar that are not included in Zode's Asian law books. So my question is, does building Islamic AI based on adab principles but with externally controlled infrastructure and data truly address colonization, or does it instead create colonial consumption? Do we need to fundamentally rethink data, sovereignty, and ownership of Islamic knowledge, or are existing collaborative approach sufficient? Okay, thank you so much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih Mbak. Ya, meskipun ada robot, meskipun ada artificial intelligence, tetap we human beings are very, more important than these. I mean, these robot are created by human beings, right? So jadi nanti kita tetap saja belajar di pesantren, menemui para kiai, lalu mendengarkan mendengarkan bagaimana ceramahnya, bagaimana pengajiannya, terus dan kata tadi Bu Santi itu di situ ada rasa. Kalau manusia itu punya rasa. Ya, kalau artificial intelligence bisa menjawab pertanyaan apa? Saya sakit kepala, apa obatnya? Dia jawab. Seenaknya aja pokoknya jawabnya apa gitu. Pokoknya ada data yang masuk di sistem komputer. Kan gitu ya. Nah, kalau manusia ini berkahnya tuh di situ ya. Berkahnya itu ada rasa, ada something psikis. Jadi ketika ada doa, ada ya dan macam-macam ya gitu. Jadi berkahnya tetap kita itu belajar kepada para ulama, para kiai, siapapun ya kan, sepanjang hidup ini sampai hari kiamat. Tetapi dalam waktu yang bersamaan itu kemudian kita dibubuhi ilmu-ilmu baru, infrastruktur baru berupa robot-robot yang ahli dalam bidangnya itu. Jadi kalau ditanya itu bagaimana konsep kalam menurut Asy'ari, dia jawab itu. Tapi yang cuma knowledge, berkahnya itu ada ketika ketika kita bersama dengan human beings yang lainnya, karena ada doa di situ. Tapi intinya human beings ya, kita semua lebih hebat daripada robot itu sendiri dan pada artificial intelligence, karena ada something else yang tidak dimiliki oleh itu tadi, rasa, psikis, belief di dalamnya kayak gitu tuh. Itu yang membuat berkah-berkah itu ya.
Baik, sedikit saya mungkin kita bisa kita agree or disagree gitu ya. Bagi saya gitu ya, AI itu hanya alat bantu aja. Ya, tidak untuk menggantikan. Saya tadi menunggu Mbak, apakah guru akan hilang gitu kan. Jadi nggak akan gitu ya, nggak akan. Tapi guru yang tidak pakai AI akan tergantikan oleh guru yang pakai AI. Nah itu karena apa? Karena anak-anak atau siswa atau mahasiswa kita tumbuh pada zamannya. Kenapa tadi Pak Dir menginginkan ada robot yang bisa menjelaskan tentang sanad? Karena itu akan membantu gitu. Jadi kalau menurut saya sih nggak bisa semua hal itu kita bebankan ke AI and robotik, nggak bisa. Apalagi untuk hal-hal yang bersifat tadi berkah gitu ya, doa dan segala macam. Jadi kalau menurut saya sih yang sudah menyangkut tadi dari leher ke bawah itu nggak bisa kita semua bebankan ke AI. Untuk membantu yes, mempercepat yes, mempermudah yes. Ya, tapi tidak untuk menggantikan. Apalagi kalau guru-guru kita ya, kiai kita sudah tidak akan tergantikan lah kalau menurut saya. Gitu Pak, silakan Pak Bart.
Yeah, and I realize that we forgot one question as well from the audience. So maybe following up on Busanti, not like, yes, it's a tool. It's a very powerful tool. Realize it will become more powerful soon. I realize that we all were laughing about Google Translate when we first had it on our phone. We thought like, that's silly. That's a wrong translation, but it has become pretty good over time. If you look at ChatGPT, what it does like in just 1 year time, how it looked like 2 years back, 1 year back, and now it's like, wow, incredible how quick it is. I gave the example of Nashid about Gen AI and creativity. I don't think it's just a tool. I think it can make us maybe become more ethical and more spiritual over time as well in focusing. And that's why I, during that Nashid conference, gave the example of the Ibu that do the prompting through DALL-E Mid-Journey. And for them, it's a very spiritual exercise. They're not just making a calendar or nice images or political statements, but what they're doing is really practicing. And then, yeah, they want to do something really badly and they try to make it perfect. And every night they're doing that again. And all in all, it's a very spiritual exercise thanks to AI. Yes, I would even dare to say that these women have become more spiritual due to the AIs they've been using over time. And that's interesting, I would say, and a new phenomenon. A very fair observation, Bah. You were asking, like, with all the adab in the world, with all the ethical behavior that Muslims can bring to the floor, is it going to change anything if your data are still from a Western library? No, I don't think so. And for me, then the problem is twofold. It's about good manners. It's about bringing Islamic spiritual values to it. It's also about ownership. If you still have shitty data or data that don't work for you, and you can be as ethical as you wish to, but it's not going to do the trick, I would say. We don't hardly have any control over this. Like, you can try to prompt whatever, you can ask for whatever kind of image you want, but if those images have like 100 years of traditions that are put in there, and you can't change them overnight. It means you need new data. And that's going to be very expensive, I would say. And something that we are all in together. And I think that was the question of, we had previously about the gendered perspectives, of course, of AI. And we have a big problem there with our data, that they're geared towards a certain segment of the world population, which is white, which is male. And that's going to take some time and a lot of self-reflection, I would say. You're not going to change it just by saying like, oh, we are good Muslims, we show good behavior. No, garbage in, garbage out, they say. Not if you have shitty data. It will remain shitty data in your output as well. So that will take a tremendous effort, I would say.
Okay, so Prof. Bart's answer, I think, concludes our meeting today. And please give another round of applause to our speakers. But I like the statement in Prof. Bart's presentation, faith in the future, because inside the word faith, there is AI, right? And yeah, AI, faith, F-A-I-T-H. I believe both aspects have been closer than ever in shaping our future. So again, thank you very much for all of the audience, to the committee, Pak Marik, Mbak Zweta, Mas Afwan, and also to all university leaders, to all ministry leaders, and to all of the audience. Thank you very much for coming to this event. See you again next time and see you again in the future. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.